When Kofi threw his pregnant wife into the rain that night, he did not know that the river collects all debts. He did not know that the ancestors were watching. He stood at the door of his compound, his new woman clinging to his arm, her wrapper of fine cloth shimmering in the lamplight, and he watched Adheres stumble into the darkness, her swollen belly heavy with his child, her worn wrapper soaked through. The villagers who heard her cries pulled their doors shut. They knew. They all knew. A man who casts out his pregnant wife invites a curse that will devour 7 generations. Adheres was born in the small village of Umuna, where the river sang ancient songs and the forest held secrets older than memory. She was the daughter of a palm wine tapper, a simple man who climbed tall trees each morning to collect the sweet liquid that men drank under the moon. Her mother had died bringing her into this world, and the midwives whispered that the baby girl had come wrapped in a veil, a sign that she carried the blessing of the ancestors. She grew into a woman whose beauty was quiet, like dawn breaking over still water. Her skin was smooth as river clay, dark and rich. Her eyes held depths that made people uncomfortable, as if she could see things they tried to hide. She wore simple wrappers of indigo cloth and a single strand of cowrie shells around her neck that her father had given her. Her head wrap was always tied with care, even when working in the yam fields. The village women said she was too proud. "She walks like she knows something we don't," they muttered while pounding cassava in their mortars. "A palm wine tapper's daughter should know her place." But the truth was different. Adheres simply carried the quiet dignity of one who has been marked by the spirits. She helped her father, cooked his meals, and spoke little. When she went to the market, young men watched her pass, but something in her gaze made them look away. It was at the great market, 3 villages away, that Kofi first saw her. He was a trader, a man whose wealth came from buying palm oil and selling it to merchants from distant lands. His compound had 3 huts with strong thatched roofs. He wore wrappers of fine cotton and bronze bracelets that clinked when he moved. Women desired him. Mothers pushed their daughters toward him. But when he saw Adheres, balancing a basket of yams on her head, her wrapper swaying with each step, something stirred in his chest that he had never felt before. "Who is that woman?" he asked the other traders. "The palm wine tapper's daughter from Umuna," they said. "Beautiful, yes, but strange. They say she was born with a veil. Some say she can see the future." Kofi pursued her like a hunter tracking precious game. He appeared at her father's compound with gifts, cola nuts, fine cloth, a goat. The old palm wine tapper was overwhelmed. "My daughter is blessed by your attention," he said, his voice shaking. Adheres said little. She watched Kofi with those deep eyes, and something in her seemed to hesitate. But her father was old and tired, and Kofi was wealthy. She agreed. The wedding was modest. They slaughtered a goat, and the villagers ate and drank palm wine under the stars. "You are lucky," the women told Adheres as they tied her wedding beads around her waist. "A rich husband, a big compound. Your children will never know hunger." But Adheres had dreamed the night before her wedding. In her dream, she saw a river rising, 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 until it swallowed everything. She saw herself standing alone in water that reached her neck, her belly swollen with child, and she saw Kofi's face turning away. For 6 moons, their marriage was as peaceful as still water. Kofi provided well. Adheres kept his compound clean, cooked his meals, and never complained. The villagers nodded with approval. "See how she works," the older women said at the river, where they washed clothes. A good wife, quiet and respectful. Then Adheres became pregnant, and her belly began to swell with new life. It was during those days that Zola arrived. Zola came from a village far away, a woman whose beauty struck like lightning. Her skin was light as honey, her body curved like the letter that merchants wrote. She wore wrappers of silk that men said came from across the great waters, and her waist beads were so many they made music when she walked. She had breasts that stood proud and high, lips painted with red dye, and eyes that promised things that good women should not promise. She came to the market, and men forgot their own names. She walked past Kofi's trading post, and he forgot his pregnant wife waiting at home. She smiled at him, and he forgot everything his mother had taught him about good women and bad women. "That one is trouble," the village elders warned, adjusting their wrappers as they sat under the great tree. "A woman who paints her lips and wears silk does not seek a husband. She seeks what a husband owns." But Kofi did not listen. He began spending his evenings at the Palm Wine Bar, where Zola laughed too loudly and touched his arm too often. He came home late, smelling of palm wine and something else his wife could not name. Adheres, her belly now round as a full moon, said nothing. She simply watched with those eyes that saw too much. 3 moons after Zola arrived, Kofi moved her into a hut in his compound. The village exploded with gossip. Women stopped their work at the river to speak in urgent whispers. "Did you hear? Kofi brought that woman into his compound while his wife is pregnant." One elder woman, pounding yam in her mortar, shook her head until her head wrap loosened. "The river collects all debts," she said quietly. "Mark my words, this will not end well." Men at the Palm Wine Bar argued. "A man of wealth can have 2 wives," some said. "But not while the first wife is heavy with child," others countered, pouring palm wine on the ground for the ancestors. "This is not the proper way. This brings shame." Adheres endured. She cooked for both Kofi and his new woman. She cleaned. She pretended not to hear Zola's laughter coming from Kofi's hut at night. She wrapped her wrapper tighter around her swollen belly and remembered her dream of rising water. Then one evening, Zola went to Kofi as he ate the meal Adheres had prepared. She knelt beside him, her wrapper sliding to show the curve of her shoulder. "My love," she whispered, loud enough for Adheres to hear from where she swept the compound. "How can we be truly happy with her here? She watches me with evil eyes. I fear for our love. I fear what she might do." Kofi looked at his pregnant wife, her belly huge now, her wrapper worn thin, her head wrap faded from many washings. Then he looked at Zola, painted and perfumed and promising. That night he made his decision. The rain was falling hard, as if the sky itself was weeping, when Kofi grabbed Adheres by the arm. "Pack your things," he said. His voice was cold. "You are no longer welcome in this compound." Adheres stared at him, one hand on her belly, where their child kicked and moved. "I am your wife," she whispered. "I carry your child." "I have a new wife now," Kofi said. "One who does not look at me with judgment. One who makes me happy. Take your things and go back to your father." "My father is dead," Adheres said quietly. "He died 2 moons ago. You were too busy with her to notice." "Then find somewhere else." He pushed her toward the door. Behind him, Zola watched with a smile that did not reach her eyes. The villagers heard Adheres' cries as Kofi threw her belongings into the rain. They heard her beg. They heard him curse her and push her out of his compound. But no one opened their doors. They were afraid of Kofi's wealth, afraid of his anger, afraid of being involved in something that the ancestors would surely punish. Adheres stumbled into the night, her wrapper soaked, her belly heavy, her small bundle of belongings clutched to her chest. She walked through the village, past compounds where lamplight glowed warm, past families eating together, past children sleeping peacefully. No one took her in. They all looked away. She walked until she reached the edge of the village, where the forest began. There, at the foot of the ancient Iroko tree that the elders said housed spirits, she collapsed. The rain poured down. Her baby moved inside her, and she wrapped her arms around her belly. "Forgive me, little one," she whispered. "Forgive your mother for bringing you into this darkness." And then she heard a voice. "Child of the veil, daughter marked by the ancestors. Your tears have been counted. Adheres looked up. Standing before her was an old woman, ancient beyond counting. Her wrapper was woven from something that looked like moonlight. Her eyes glowed with inner fire. Around her neck hung beads that pulsed with their own light, and in her hand she carried a staff carved with symbols that hurt to look at. "Who are you?" Adheres whispered. "I am what I have always been. I am the keeper of debts. I am the one who balances scales." The old woman knelt beside Adheres, and despite the rain, her wrapper remained dry. "You were born with a veil, child. You were marked. And the man who cast you out, who threw his pregnant wife into the darkness, he has invited a curse that will consume everything he owns." "I want no revenge," Adheres said, her voice breaking. "I only want shelter for my child." "The river collects all debts," the old woman said softly, "whether you ask for it or not. The ancestors have already spoken. But you, child, you will be protected. Your child will be protected. And when the debt is paid, you will understand that sometimes the greatest blessing comes wrapped in the darkest night." The old woman touched Adheres' forehead with one wrinkled finger, and warmth spread through her body. "Walk into the forest," she said. "Follow the path only you can see. There you will find shelter. There you will birth your child. And there you will wait until the river has finished collecting." When Adheres opened her eyes, the old woman was gone, but she could see a path through the darkness, glowing faintly, leading deeper into the forest. She stood, and though her body was tired and her heart was broken, she felt strength she had not known she possessed. She walked into the forest, and the trees seemed to part before her. She found a small hut, ancient but sound, nestled in a clearing where the rain did not fall. Inside was everything she needed: a sleeping mat, clay pots filled with water, yams and plantains arranged in a basket, a fire burning in the center, though no one had lit it. She collapsed onto the mat and slept. Back in the village, Kofi celebrated. He bought fine cloth for Zola. He bought her gold beads and bronze bracelets. They ate the best food and drank the sweetest palm wine. "Now we can be truly happy," Zola whispered, running her painted fingers across his chest. "Now nothing stands between us." But the very next morning, Kofi woke to find his best goat dead. Its eyes were rolled back, its mouth foaming. "Strange," he muttered. "It was healthy yesterday." 3 days later, 2 more goats died, then his chickens. One by one, they simply fell over and stopped moving. The village herbalist came and shook his head. "I see no sickness," he said, backing away from the compound. "This is something else, something I cannot treat." Word spread through the village faster than wildfire. Women at the river spoke in hushed voices as they beat their clothes against the stones. "Did you hear? All of Kofi's animals are dying." One old woman, the same who had warned before, nodded slowly. "The river has begun to collect," she said. "I told you. A man who casts out his pregnant wife does not escape unpunished." Kofi told himself it was coincidence, bad luck. He still had his wealth. He still had his trading business. But then the merchants from distant lands stopped coming. They took their business elsewhere. "We heard things," they said when he tried to visit them. "We heard you are cursed. We cannot do business with a cursed man." His palm oil began to spoil in the pots, turning rancid and foul. His money seemed to disappear, slipping through his fingers like water through a broken calabash. He would count his cowrie shells at night and find fewer the next morning, though his door was locked. The villagers watched from their doorways, their faces grim. "The river collects all debts," they whispered to each other at the evening fire. "You cannot throw away a pregnant wife and expect the ancestors to look away." Zola began to change. Her beauty, which had seemed so radiant, began to fade like cloth left too long in the sun. Her skin broke out in sores that would not heal. Her hair, which had been thick and lustrous, began to fall out in clumps. She looked in the polished bronze mirror and screamed. "What is happening to me?" she cried. "You are cursed," the village healer said when she begged him for help. "You destroyed a home. You took a man from his pregnant wife. The ancestors do not forgive such things. There is nothing I can do." Kofi tried to hold on to his wealth, his status, his pride. But everything crumbled like dry earth. His fine wrappers became rags. His bronze bracelets he had to sell for food. The compound that had once been full and prosperous became empty and cold. Even the children who used to play in the village square would run away when they saw him coming, shouting, "The cursed man! The cursed man!" 6 moons after he had thrown adheres into the rain, Kofi had nothing left. He wandered through the village begging for scraps, his wrapper hanging loose on his thinning frame, his eyes hollow with despair. Zola had left him 3 moons before, crawling back to whatever village she had come from, her beauty destroyed, her skin marked with sores that would never heal. And still, the villagers whispered, "The river collects all debts." One night, desperate and broken, Kofi walked into the forest. He had heard stories, old stories, about the ancient Iroko tree where spirits dwelt. He thought perhaps he could beg the spirits for mercy. Perhaps they would lift this curse that had destroyed his life. He found the tree, massive and ancient, its roots spreading like veins across the forest floor. And there, at its base, he saw a small hut glowing with warm light. Curiosity and desperation drove him forward. He peered through the doorway. Inside, he saw a daisy, but not the broken woman he had cast out. She sat by the fire, wearing a wrapper that seemed woven from starlight itself. Her skin glowed with health and beauty that made his knees weak, and in her arms she held a baby. A son, perfect and beautiful, sleeping peacefully against her breast. Around her were baskets overflowing with yams and plantains, clay pots filled with palm oil that gleamed golden in the firelight. Everything he had lost, she seemed to have found. But more than that, she had peace. She had dignity. She had something he could not name, but desperately wanted. "A daisy," he whispered, his voice breaking. She looked up, and her eyes held no anger, only a deep sadness. "Kofi," she said quietly. He fell to his knees at the doorway. "Forgive me," he begged. "I was a fool. I threw you away for a woman who brought me only ruin. I cast out my own child. I have lost everything. The whole village says I am cursed. Please forgive me. Let me come back. Let me be a father to my son." Adase looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "The river has collected its debt, Kofi. Everything you lost was everything you did not deserve. You chose to destroy your home for painted lips and silk wrappers. You chose to throw your pregnant wife into the rain while the village watched. The ancestors saw. They always see. But I am sorry," Kofi wept. "I am truly sorry." "Sorry does not rebuild what you destroyed," Adase said. "Sorry does not erase the night you cast me out. Sorry does not change the fact that you cared more for a stranger's beauty than for your own wife and child." She stood, holding her son close. "But I will tell you this. Your son will know his father's name. When he is old enough, I will tell him about you. I will tell him about the man who chose wrong and paid the price. And maybe, through that story, he will learn to choose better." "Can I not even hold him?" Kofi begged. "Can I not even see his face?" "You can see him," Adase said. She walked to the doorway, and in the firelight, Kofi saw his son's face. Beautiful. Perfect. A child who would grow up knowing his mother's strength, but never knowing his father's love. "His name is Namdi. It means my father is alive. I gave him that name so he would always know that his father lives, even if his father is not with us." Kofi reached out, but Adase stepped back. "Go, Kofi," she said softly. "Go and live with what you have done. The curse is lifted now. The river has collected what was owed. You will not die. You will not starve. But you will live, knowing that you destroyed the greatest blessing you ever had for something that turned to dust in your hands." Kofi stumbled backward, his heart shattering like a calabash dropped from a great height. He turned and walked back through the forest, back to the village where everyone knew his shame. The next morning, the villagers woke to find Adheres and her son living in her father's old compound. It had been restored, every hut rebuilt, every thatch new and strong. She had baskets of food and pots of oil and everything she needed. No one knew how she had returned or where her blessings came from, but they all understood. "The ancestors protect those who are wronged," the elders said, nodding wisely under the great tree. "They curse those who destroy homes and cast out pregnant wives. This is the way it has always been." Kofi lived on in the village, but he lived as a shadow. He survived on the charity of those who remembered when he was wealthy. He watched from a distance as his son grew strong and beautiful, learning to walk, learning to speak. He watched as the village celebrated adheres and protected her. He watched as young men began to court her again, good men this time, men who saw her worth. And he understood too late that the river always collects its debts, that a man who throws his pregnant wife into the rain invites a curse that cannot be lifted, that some choices, once made, can never be unmade. Years later, when Namdi was old enough to understand, Adheres took him to see his father. Kofi was old before his time, his wrapper thin, his face lined with regret. The boy looked at him with his mother's deep eyes. "This is your father," Adheres said gently. "Remember his story. Remember that a man who destroys his home for temporary pleasure loses everything that matters. Remember that the ancestors are always watching. And remember that true wealth is not in gold or bronze bracelets or fine cloth. True wealth is in the family you protect and the vows you keep." Namdi looked at his father for a long moment. Then he took his mother's hand, and they walked away. And they lived happily ever after, Adheres and her son, in the village where everyone knew that the river collects all debts, that justice comes to those who are patient, and that a man who casts out his pregnant wife will lose everything he thought he valued. The end.